This is Ken Williams of Unfold the Soul. Welcome you to the Status Grow podcast. Let me tell you, this is going to be real talk focused on disrupting the status quo, baby. So, are you ready? Get set, and let's grow with your hosts, Paul O'Neill and Corey Radish.
Oh man, gotta thank Ken Williams for the best intro in podcasting, I think, right now. Maybe even ever, Paul. I know I say it every week or every time we record, but it truly is a great introduction. And how are you, my friend? Good to see you. I know we've been busy since the last podcast. Lots going on professionally and personally. Tonight, for instance, was my third daughter's senior prom. So her high school career is coming to an end. And then it's on to, next chapter of her life. And, we'll see where that takes us. But, a lot of conversations this week around how to finish strong during this pandemic and everything that we've been through. And not just in education. I think, as we start to open up, into the public again, how even people in other industries are dealing with, being remote, being stuck at home. A lot of conversations we had this Sunday, even on Coffee EDU, about, breaking point, reaching your breaking point. And we had some really lively discussion around not blanketing the profession with that term, because when we do that, we tend to then shy away from wanting to impart the change that we talked about throughout in the beginning of the pandemic. Remember, we said we can't go back to the way it was, but a lot of talk right now about, burnout, which I get. I'm compassionate. It's been difficult. I like the word fatigue. I like the word, exhausted even. But I just get cautious when we hear that, because we know the changes that need to take place in order to status grow. And, I was wondering if you had any conversations this week after Sunday when we had our discussion.
Most certainly did. Corey, good to see you, man. Episode 5. Can't believe it. We are here. It's June. Summer is pretty much upon us, the summer season, although you couldn't tell it based on the weather, here in the New Jersey Shore. It was a wet weekend we had, but, great conversation. The conversation was hot this weekend, so it felt great, talking about breaking point. And it's interesting that whole blanket statement piece was powerful. You got to be careful, because blanket statements create limiting language, right? And we definitely don't want to limit anybody. And everybody responds to things differently. It's kind of like stress. Everybody has stress. It's just how you respond to it. And the pandemic's been difficult for everybody on some level. There's been loss for people. There's been uncertainty. There's been doubt. There's been a whole range of emotions that people have experienced, and everybody handles that differently. I think a breaking point, and I think about it as a New York Knicks fan, I'm still rocking the gear, man. But down 3-1, like as a fan, I'm at the breaking point. You know what I mean? But that's like just a fan thing, that's not serious business. That's not serious work. That's sports, which they say imitates life, but I don't know if it really does, to be honest with you. I'll still root all the way. But, this is a great opportunity to talk about a conversation that my principal and I had, Holly Nemec. You know her from Coffee EDU. And folks, if you're not following her on Twitter, she is dynamic, amazing leader. So thankful to work with her every day. And what she talked about when we talked about breaking point, she talked about the fact that we're very lucky in the sense, while this year has been very unique and it's presented unique challenges, we're very lucky in the sense that our year is very traditional. And what I mean by that is certain times of the year, we can expect certain things to happen. There's a paperwork crush. There is a goals crush, we've got to focus on our goals and standardized testing. And there's a behavioral crush, in the beginning of the year when you're trying to, set what the standard for your class is going to be through expectations and such. And then at the end of the middle of the year, when the kids are thinking about the holidays, and then at the end of the year when kids have summer fever and stuff like that. So we're very fortunate where we can see those things coming. And it was such an astute point that my principal, Holly Nemec, brought about. And it made me think, and I wanted to share that with you, because I think that that's something we can control. We can't control the pandemic. We can't control the things that were thrust in our path because it was uncertain. It was unprecedented. It was all those things. We had to pivot, right? The favorite word of 2020, 2021, had to make so many different changes.
And you're muted.
Oh,
not now. And you're that's
I had to check, and I was like, wait a second, I just talked for 2 minutes and I was muted. That was like some of the best work I've put out there. I won't use that word again, I promise. But in all seriousness, Corey, this is a great segue to our guest. Like, we spent time with him last week. We put out there on social media that he's not an educator, and I'm really proud of the fact that we haven't pigeonholed ourselves in this show to be only about educators and to be only about certain topics. We're certainly going to grow and we're going to stretch, which really supports, the whole title of what we do, to Status Grow. So I think without any further ado, I'm going to send it back to you because you've got some good backstory to give our guests the proper introduction.
Yeah, Paul, thanks so much for that. And as we vox back and forth this week leading up to today, the excitement around this next guest and being someone who's not in education, but can definitely teach a lot of lessons. There's no doubt about that. And, for me, I spent a small portion of in his life in a place where we both worked. He was a little kid at the time. Like I told you, always a great worker. And always respectful. I mean, that's the one thing I remember about him. He just was always respectful to me. Wasn't my wife at the time. She was, we were dating and she was going to be my wife, but she used to give him rides home, I think, sometimes, and, help him out, while he was bussing tables and doing those things. And Paul, the beauty of, I think, this episode is that this story, the lessons in it it's for everybody. Right? Not that the lessons of our incredible guests in the past 4 episodes are not. You could take something from each of those episodes and put it into your personal life. But this guy's story, I tried to hold back tears when we had the production meeting. The pride I have in, having him on right now. I'm getting a little choked up at, just going into the introduction, because when everybody out there in Status Grow Nation, when you hear this story, you realize that you could get through anything, right? If you just put some belief and faith, sometimes a little prayer, and have that, even just a slice of hope, and that's going to come into play in a second, you could do anything. And so it is with the utmost pleasure and pride to introduce my friend Dan Hoff, but we call him Dano. And welcome, Dano. Welcome to the Status Grow podcast, my friend. How you doing this evening?
Fantastic, guys. Fantastic. Living the dream one day at a time, man.
Yeah, you say living the dream, and somebody who's just listening to the opening of this podcast is like, oh, that's like cliche, right? Living the dream is cliche, but you are actually living the dream, because we're going to get into it a little bit. Everybody out there, Dan is going to be very raw and honest, and he's going to be an open book about where he's been in his life. But this man is actually, every day that he wakes up, he's living the dream. He used a term during our production that has stuck with me, that like he's won the lottery of life. And each day he feels that, when he wakes, he's won the lottery of life because, folks, Dano is a recovering alcoholic and drug addict who went down a very, very dark path. And, we're going to talk about that. And Dano, just share with the audience a little bit about your upbringing. I know there were some things that happened in your childhood that caused some pain and strife that, everybody has to own their mistakes, right? So it's not what put you with the bottle or put you using some drugs, but there were some things that happened. So let's start with your childhood and just share that out a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. And it is an open book, Corey. I don't know that I will at all live up to the very fond and and built up intro you laid out for me. So no pressure, huh, kid? But again, I mean, I think you're right when you classify me as someone who feels like they've won the lottery of life, because, and I do. I kind of, my tagline is, living the dream one day at a time. It's the truth. I say that, and it does sound sort of cliche, but when you've lived the nightmare in your life, which I have, I can say that with fortitude and gratitude, that I truly do believe I'm living the dream one day at a time, and I think you did a pretty good job of kind of articulating briefly some of our history, and that history plays a large part in my story. That timeline, that adolescent period of my life, I think it did a lot to kind of shape who I became. Met a lot of people, met some great teachers during that time of my life. A lot of people put in my life at that time that would play sort of an integral role of how I would develop and, who I would grow into be. I think my story is not very special. It's not very unique. I have a very, very similar story to a lot of people who have lived the life I have, or who classify themselves as, a recovering alcoholic and a drug addict. I will say that I can kind of boil my story down, to four simple words, right? Pain, gratitude, hope, and faith, right? I think if I look at my life today, then, now, pre-sobriety, navigating into sobriety and living a sober life, I could probably point to those four words and not say anything else, right? My life is kind of, always was, there was a lot of pain, right? There was just a lot of pain associated with the way that I lived my life, in active alcoholism and drug addiction. And that's just a fact and a reality. I think, followed by the pain, after I got sober, came some gratitude, just that I just wasn't in pain anymore, right? If you just think about the actual physical relief and sort of the mental relief that's associated with, separating, from alcohol and drugs when you're afflicted. And then that gratitude kind of, if you're lucky, grants, leads you to some hope, and that hope ultimately, if practiced and actionized, turns into faith. That's just kind of the cadence that I kind of experienced. By the way, right, kind of counting on my 17th year of sobriety, it's still not very different, right? Like, newsflash, I can find myself in a whole lot of trouble and a whole lot of what we call stinking thinking, fully separated from drugs and alcohol, and certainly, can be no stranger to pain, right? And so, typically speaking, my ability to affect or actionize change in my life is usually directly correlated with the amount of pain that I've experienced or willing to experience until I become willing to affect the change or actionize the change that's needed to alleviate the pain, right? Like, not complicated stuff. Certainly has taken a long time to shrink that time frame of the pain, to the action, right? So
when we talk real quick about pain, if you don't mind, letting the listeners, the viewers, in, that pain started when you were young, right? With your dad. You want to talk a little bit about that and where it led? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of double click, kind of just to kind of take a walk back, kind of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now is kind of the format we typically like to follow in my club. And so, I look back on that life that again is sort of, when I hear stories like mine, I come to to realize that it's not very special and it's not very unique and it's not very different, that it's actually very, very similar to a lot of folks who, who I associate with. And so, I can track that pain back to some pivotal moments as a child. I think, when I look at my life, as someone who identifies as an active alcoholic, I think a lot of what we talk about, the isms, were there, right? At a very, very early age, long before the bottle or the drug or the whatever came, right? They were there, I believe, I believe that I was certainly born with this thing. But yeah, I mean, I as a young boy, I lost my father. I was 8 years old when my father died. He was an active alcoholic and a drug addict. He died of AIDS in the 80s. He was a heroin addict. And, one day, he was sick, and then about 30 days later, he was dead. And so I look back at that time and I think about, I've got an 8-year-old boy right now, and so I think about, the pain that's associated with that. And I think about often, about, what reality is like for an 8-year-old boy when dad doesn't come home, and, it's tragic to think about. And it's certainly very sad, makes me sad now, for different reasons now than then. For a long time, I was sad and angry and had felt, all the feelings that are associated with abandonment and that. But I think when I think about that pain today, I think I look at my son and it's a different kind of pain, right? And again, I think that pain immediately today reminds me of the gratitude that I have, that one day at a time, my that does not have to be my reality. It does not have to be my kids' reality. It does not have to be my son and daughter's reality to kind of wake up on a Tuesday morning in October and be told that, that dad's not coming home, So I will say, though, that it certainly was a linchpin in my life. It was a galvanizing moment. I feel like it certainly set forth a series of events that otherwise likely would not have happened. Did it make me an alcoholic or a drug addict? No. I mean, I think I was born with that. I think that was one of those things my father left me with. I think it's part of my story and it's who I am. And I certainly think that that it's pain that later sort of manifested itself in some different ways, and that through the process of recovery, I was able to kind of uncover, some reasonings, some hows to the whys. I think after that, I had a sort of a relatively normal childhood, with exception to the fact that I was just always sort of an angry kid. I found myself probably a lot angrier than my peer group, and I found myself, lashing out in ways that at a very, very young age that I think, everybody, educators like yourselves and folks that kind of would have saw me on the radar saw that there was something brewing under the surface, if that makes any sense.
Totally. You speak with such conviction, and I would imagine that, finding your voice comes through some trial and error, comes through some reflection and some years of experience, and as I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm sure Corey's feeling the same way, we don't want to stop you, at all, but we've got, there's so many questions, so many things that come across our minds, and I think you did a great job of describing the pain, and listen, we're basically a 1-hour show. It could probably be a 1-hour show on the pain alone, right? But you talk about the pain, and you talk about the gratitude, anybody that's blessed to have children or to have young people in their lives that care about them, that's just some gratitude in and of itself, right? You're able to find some motivation there and some inspiration to do some great things for the people that love you in your circle. Can you elaborate a little bit, though, on the hope and faith part? Because I think sometimes people get that confused, on what hope and faith really is, and how hope and faith play a role. And I'm most specifically curious on not only how it's played a role in your recovery and current recovery, but how it's played a role through the pandemic. Because I would imagine that probably threw a wrinkle, into things, might have changed some of your routines a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Great question. I think, when I think about life as an active alcoholic, one of those words that comes up is hopeless, right? And so, we talk kind of, in our circles, about just that hopelessness. And, I think that's a feeling and sort of a tragic fate that only, folks like me who identify as, as active alcoholics, I think can relate with. I think it's, our common bond is the pain, and I think that hopelessness, that sort of just kind of despair, and just that, the lack of hope is just, it's something that I will never forget. I'll be damned if I do. And I think, conversely, sort of that hopelessness that's associated with active alcoholism addiction, the progressively negative disease of alcoholism and addiction, right? As equally as progressive is the positivity that is recovery, right? So as hopeless as active alcoholism is as hopeful as active recovery is, right? And it's equally as progressive in nature, in the sense that it only gains speed and gathers momentum as it's practiced and sort of implemented into action, right? Very much similarly, kind of two poles on the driving in either directions. It's like active alcoholism and addiction will only ever get worse, right? Will only ever bring more pain, will only ever lead to bigger and badder things. Active recovery and the practicing and living in active recovery, which is work, by the way, is not something that just happens through osmosis. It's something that must be practiced, is equally as hopeful. Right. And so I think when we talk about hope, when I talk about hope to me is something, that's always there, should I choose to see it. Right. It's about optics. It's about kind of reshaping the lens in which you look your life through, the way you live your life. It's always there. Right. I look at it this way. I used to talk about, before I got sober, I used to walk out of my house every day past the same damn set of pretty flowers. Never noticed it. Then one day I got sober and I walked past them same flowers and I noticed how pretty they were in the sunlight, right? It's no different, right? The flowers didn't change. The path didn't change. The sidewalk didn't change. Nothing changed. Just the way that I was looking at them kind of was shifted, and in my opinion, divinely kind of altered. So I look at my life, and I think I look at my life in sobriety and my outlook on life, and the ability for me, to be willing to see the hope in life is totally kind of, it's an inside job. And then I think if you double click into that, right, that the difference between that hope and faith is simply action and practice. Right. I mean, hope is something that anybody can have, anybody can see at any given time. Faith is something that, is taking hope and sort of, now it's work. Now it's time to put in the work and actually, practice these principles daily, monthly, weekly, and over time. That faith is something that will come when practiced.
Yeah. I mean, so many things to unpack there, action and practice. That hope is always there. And, Paul, I think I might take the opportunity just to declare a StatusGROW moment right there. That hope. And here's the thing, right? And this is where, you find validation in so many different places sometimes, right? Like we're Twitter nerds and we do our ed stuff and we get validated with the people. But, Paul and I are so into the word hope and instilling hope. One of the things I've said with my staffs, almost to the point where they would make fun of me, is I use the term merchants of hope. Right? As educators, we're merchants of hope. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But, understanding that hope is there. And I don't want to say it's a choice to see it, because sometimes what you're going through is really, it's blurring your vision. But knowing that it's there, that hope is out there. And we're going to talk about how you literally stumbled into hope. In a second, because I want to kind of, Paul's like the good cop, and I'm like the bad one that comes back to some of the pain. So I apologize, Dano. But, in talking at the pre-production and forming your, things that you talk about, and then, in recovery, having that positivity, having hope and faith, there were a lot of things that happened to you. And the reason I bring it up is everybody goes through stuff, right? There's different complexity to it. There's different depth. Everybody goes through stuff. You went through a lot of stuff. You just shared, the sad story of your dad passing, due to, you know, drinking, drugs, and getting sick, right? So you grow up. I know that your mom is one of your heroes in your life, that did everything she can, as a single mom to raise good kids, and she did. I mean, you're a great kid. Then we get to working at the restaurant together. You go from busboy. You'd work your guys, everybody out. This dude worked his tail off, even through some of the, drinking. Let's say he still worked his tail off and learned how to cook, and became a great cook under our friends at the Falcos, at Falcos Catering, and then obviously with Anthony, who was a chef who took over after they sold the restaurant. And unfortunately, Dano, it's a sad story that at 24 years old, he passes away while you're sitting next to him on the couch. Can you talk a little bit about how that was another moment in your life where you felt abandonment that really put you down the bad spiral?
Yeah, I think it's when I share my story kind of in our normal format. This is something that obviously always comes up. I think at that time in my life, I was going one way or the other. I was zigging when I should have zagged, and to your point, I had some great people in my life always along the way. I think God has always done a fine job of placing people in my life who would always who would be there to help. Anthony Marsico is just, one of my greatest friends in life. I've got his name tattooed on my back, right under my father's, and, was just one of those special people, had one of those smiles that could light up a room, and just was one of those guys who I'll never forget, unfortunately, unbeknownst to I think anybody, Anthony had a heart condition that nobody knew about, and not very different from any other Wednesday night after work. We kind of leave together. We go hang at his house and watch some Seinfeld and have a couple beers and sit on the couch. And and one night he just he kind of just started choking and just dropped dead on his couch. Terribly sad and tragic, next to his wife, who was 6 months pregnant, and myself. I mean, we called 911, the whole bit. It was just really, really heavy at a pretty crazy age. And Anthony was one of those guys who I looked up to. He was one of those guys who I sort of looked at as a, kind of a positive male figure in my life. Was just crazy enough, but not really that crazy. Was sort of, like the drink and party, but not like I did, right? Like, was sort of a true north sort of guy, who I could count on. When I couldn't get out of bed at noon, would, drive to my house, walk in the door, and literally drag me out, right? And kind of drag me to work. He was that kind of guy. And so, he'd punch me in the stomach and tell me I'm an idiot, and then give me a hug at the end of the night, And so it was just a special guy. And so I think that was sort of the beginning of the end for me when Anthony passed. That was, I want to say 2003. I got sober in 2005. That was the beginning of a pretty heavy downward spiral that over the next, year and a half to 2 years would take me to probably some of the darkest spots of my addiction. I mean, I don't think I probably have done the majority of the things I am least proud of along that period. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't fun. There was no party left in my party at that point. I think we talk a lot about, kind of what happens when the party's removed from your party. And at that point, it was just a lot of, empty hotel rooms, 3-4 night runs with no sleep, no food, no money, and just a whole lot of darkness and hopelessness, frankly. It was then kind of when I experienced kind of the worst of alcoholism and drug addiction. It was then when, I knew a guy who had pills. It was then when I would consider, grab a bottle of pills, chug it, and don't wake up. And I think, you know, it was at that time, kind of up until January of 2005, when I finally, you know, luckily was granted a reprieve, that I was, you know, regularly considering suicide. So I think kind of circle that fully back to, you know, living the dream one day at a time. It's, you know, what we do here, what I do here is truly one day at a time. In the beginning, it was 1 hour at a time. It's 1 minute at a time. I never gone any time in my life more than a day or 2 or 5. I remember when I had 7 days sober, clean from drugs and alcohol. To me, that was just, I certainly was starting to feel like I had won the lottery of life. I couldn't comprehend that. So I think, you know, when I look back on that time in my life, it's one of those, it's a time that I pray I never forget. I don't mind talking about it. It's not something I shy away from. It's not something that I run towards. It's frankly neither here nor there. I just pray that I never forget it, because I've been told that if I forget where I come from, I'm sort of doomed to repeat it.
That's powerful stuff, my man. I appreciate you talking so openly. We both do. So, you know, you talk about special people in your life, you know, and in education, we say excellence doesn't happen in isolation. So, you know, there was some key people in your life. And we also talk a lot in education about purpose, you know, finding your purpose, finding your why. And in pre-production, when we sat with you last week, we talked about your service to others. Now, I don't want to give away the big piece, because I'm going to leave that to Corey. You know, there's something that you found, you know, during the pandemic that, you know, was just amazingly fantastic. But I want to rewind before we even get there and talk about, you know, the days where, you know, you're first going to meetings and you're checking out that landscape. You know, you're figuring out how you can trust, how you're going to share. You know, you get past that, because we can tell. I think one of the things that made you a very logical guest for us is that you like to serve others. You know, that you enjoy serving others, and that was such a big part of your recovery, was your service of others. So can you talk to us a little bit about when you first got into meetings and realized that you had a higher calling beyond yourself, and how service to others played a role and continues to play a role in your active recovery?
Yeah, I think, look, it's you know, depending, you ask my sponsor, maybe he'll tell you how active I am in helping others. Maybe he may tell you the real story. You know, I think, look, you know, the reality is, when we talk about, you know, kind of, you know, what happens in recovery, it's you know, it's sort of we talk about it being a selfish program, right? It's like, you know, I'm going to help you because I have to, and because it feels good, and because if I don't give it away, then I can't keep it, right? And so it almost starts there. You know, if you hear some of the old timers in the program, they talk about, you know, it's a selfish program, right? It's sort of like a duplicitous meaning, though, right? I mean, they say that kind of almost in jest, right? Because it's sort of this self-serving cycle, right? You do it because it feels good, right? You also do it because I have to pass it on, right? I have to share this gift that was so freely given to me, right? I paid nothing for the wisdom, the relief, the family, the cars, the houses, all the stuff that comes along. You know, basically everything that I have in my life today, right, I can literally trace back to being a result of my engagement and ability to remain actively sober and engaged in the process of recovery, right? Like, without it, I have none of it. Like, none of it, not just some of it, like it all goes away. So it kind of all starts there foundationally, right? Like, I know this not only because in the beginning I was told it, and I was told, you know, if you don't believe that we believe until you believe, right? And so I believed, and then I experienced it, right? And then I actually began to, you know, affect this change in my life that we talked about. And I was what was, you know, kind of told to me was proved in reality, right? I look at it this way. I remember I had about, they say when you first start going to meetings, they say make 90 meetings in 90 days. And I remember hearing that at one of my first meetings, thinking these people are gotta still be high, because that is not going to happen. 90 meetings in 90 days. What the hell are they still smoking? You know, and I'll tell you, that 90 days later, when I had made 90 meetings in 90 days, it was the single greatest accomplishment of my life up until that point. I was 24 years old, and I had never truly accomplished anything in my life, right? I barely graduated high school. I had always been a worker, to Corey's point. I never went to college. And I never really had a feeling of accomplishment in my life. It's kind of sad to say out loud. It was, it was really sad then. I mean, I look back at it now and it's kind of part of my story. But, when I made 90 meetings in 90 days, I'm telling you, it was the single greatest accomplishment of my life. It was the first time in my life where I truly felt like I was doing something good, that I was working towards something that was going to be a positive influence in my life for the first time ever, really. And I remember I used to stop. I was living in Asbury on 3rd Ave, kind of 2 blocks in from Memorial, right across from the Super Extra Mart. And I used to pick these guys up at a halfway house on my way to the meeting in Belmar at the Shoreline Club on 10th and Ocean. And I remember this old man, Howie, who's since long gone, ended up having his leg amputated, was a great guy. I remember him stopping me at one of these meetings saying, "Hey man, that's a really good thing you're doing for those guys. That's keeping you sober." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, you're picking those guys up and dropping them off for the meeting." I'm like, "Howie, they live literally like 10 houses from me. Like, I'm not doing anything." And he's like, "No, man, you don't understand. That's keeping you sober, dude. You're helping another alcoholic. And that's what you need to keep doing that, because that's going to play that's what's going to keep you sober." And I remember thinking, like, I had heard it. They say it, help others, clean house, right? And all that stuff. And then, again, this is kind of just God working in your life. This isn't something that I sought out or something that I was looking to do to help myself. It just, these guys seem cool. They lived in the halfway house down the road. And I was like, "Hey, do you need a ride?" Right. Like, and so again, I think it was somewhere along there in the beginning that I realized, hey, help comes in many different ways, right? There's tons of guys in the program. They're sponsoring a bunch of guys, and they're reading the book, and they're doing what they call the work, and and then there's other guys who pick guys up and drop them off for meetings, right? And then there's other guys who just put their name on a phone list, and and they're there when someone calls, right? Help comes in a lot of different ways, in and out of AA. But I think without doing that, without actively seeking out how I can help, right? It's hard to find that purpose in my life if it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what resonates the most with Paul and I is service to others. We started a online, virtual coffee chat that was originally in person, and then the pandemic made us switch it to online, and the people we've met along the way, and hearing them say certain things like, if it wasn't for this group I wouldn't say something, or with this group I found my voice. Paul and I, when we Vox, I don't know, like 70 times a day. So we talk to each other more than we talk to our wives, I think. And, we get emotional about that because, when you give of yourself and you do it authentically, that's a drug, man, to me. Like when you can put your head on the pillow and realize you help someone. And I want to get into that. I mean, just as we recap, you shared with us that you literally stumbled in to your first meeting. I think it was January 4th, 2005, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
And thanks. And I remember some things. And folks out there, Dano has been sober ever since stumbling in. Literally, we're not. This is not figurative speech here. He literally stumbled in after a bender and took the bull by the horns, and 17 years later, he is a very highly successful regional sales manager for a pizza cheese, cheese for pizza company, and married to an incredible woman. He has 2 incredible kids that can surf way better than I can, and so where the story really comes back to what we talked about on some of the tweets and conversations about, and I don't say, I shouldn't use the word restore, and I did in a tweet. My faith in humanity doesn't have to get restored. It just, it just gets revealed in different ways a lot of times, because I believe most people are kind and just. I really do. I think the media kind of taints how most people are. But so Dano goes through all this. He becomes this incredible sales executive. He leads his own team. He decides to buy a pizza oven for his backyard, because why do I want to go out and buy pizza when I can make it better myself, right? Because he's that good at it. And so, Dano, you were sharing that when the pandemic hit. Now, here's two things. One, when the pandemic hit, and this is something that you really made Paul and I think about, people in recovery couldn't go to face-to-face meetings, which was really important in their recovery. The virtual, it's obviously different for kids taking classes, but to have that support, that physical connection of people was something we took for granted. We didn't realize, the challenge of not being able to go to face-to-face meetings. So you say to us, what the heck am I going to do? What am I going to do stuck in my home? And tell us how the idea of Slices of Hope, which I here come my goosebumps. I'm comfortable with myself to share with our audience and the millions listening. I hope there. Oh yeah, there's the shirt. Tell us how Slices of Hope starts and take us through to what you have done in accomplishing your dream of having your own restaurant.
Yeah, no, look, Slice of Hope is certainly something that I'm proud of, something that just is a feel-good story. I think, you're right. The pandemic happens, right? I'm an active guy. I lead an active life. I manage a sales team. I cover the country. I'm on the go. I get on and off planes. I've got I get to do something that I absolutely love to do. Just think about that. I get to manage a cheese brand and travel in the country selling cheese to pizza operators. I don't even, that's like, if you asked me 20 years ago what I wanted to do with my life, I probably would have wrote that down, or not even that good. It probably would have sold myself short. But yeah, I've had an oven in my backyard for some time. And I think, if you foundationally, the pandemic happens, and I'm sitting here kind of thinking, like, what the hell, what am I going to do with my time, my life? Like, we typically, my Saturdays are, I'm up at 6:30, and I've got, wrestling at 8 and soccer at 9 and, baseball at 10:30. And, I'm usually, and I don't have to explain to you, Corey, I'm usually got 5 sporting events before 2:00 on a Saturday. And I'm thinking, physically, what are we going to do to pass the time? Kind of reshape that and think, what can I do to help? Like, to me, I felt like we were living through something that was special, that was different. This was, you had sort of that movie feeling, right? Like the moment in the movie when it's like, whoa. Like, I sort of felt that, and I knew that I wanted to look back on that time when it was all over, hopefully, God willing, when it was all over, and say, kind of, where were you? What did you do? To myself, what did you do to help shine some light during a dark time, right? Like, I think I look back on it and I can say that now. That's certainly where my head was at. I don't think I thought much about it then. I think I just kind of immediately sort of sprung into action. Again, I only know this because a lot of my customer base and folks that I'm connected with in the pizza business, I saw them doing this, right? A lot of the restaurants, the pizza shops that were making food and pizzas and sending them to the hospitals, to support the frontline workers and first responders, right? Like I'm connected with a lot of folks who were doing that. And I was thinking, hey, why the hell can't we do that? Out of the backyard brick oven. We could do the same thing. Surely there are some folks who we know who we can go support and show our support and kind of help shine some light, maybe deliver some hope, in a dark time. And so that's where it started. I reached out to my neighbor, Ronnie, who we sort of kind of quarantine bubbled with, right? Like he's got 2 young kids, my kid's age. And from the very beginning, we were like, hey, okay, they literally live directly across the street. And like, we're going to just kind of get in a bubble here. And so at least we'll have each other. And so, I said, hey man, let's start shaking the trees on some folks who we know, nurses, doctors at hospitals, and let's make some pizzas, and go bring them to some folks we know, and hopefully that can help kind of shine a little, brighten up their day, right? And so that's what we did. We made 10 pizzas. We delivered them to a friend who works at Jersey Shore Medical Center. We had the kids draw pictures and sort of get involved, right? Like feel better, get well, wash your hands, all misspelled and stuff, but cute enough. And that was it. That was the first slice of hope. We made 10 pizzas. We delivered them. And then, the next day I was like, hey, that felt really good. Like we should do that again next week. We made it, I put a little note out on Facebook and Instagram and said, hey, if you were someone kind of meets this criteria, frontline worker, first responder, or just someone who could use some hope, or struggling through a hard time, or, let us know. We want to make you some pizzas. So we put a note out. We got a couple feelers. Some folks around town reached out. So-and-so I know is a nurse. Reach out to them. We reached out to them. Okay. The next week we had 2 hospital deliveries. One to Monmouth Medical, one to, the spot up in Shrewsbury. And then the following week, before you know it, gosh, I think we did almost 95 pizzas one Saturday out of that little one single pie oven. Again, I mean, I had nothing to do with it. I think what I wanted to do was to try to help. And I think a lot of good people, my partner included, and then sort of what happened next was sort of just organic in the sense that you had a lot of people who wanted to be involved in something that was good. And so to your point, Corey, I don't think, I don't need my faith in humanity restored. I think the good certainly outweighs the bad. I think the bad gets a more elevated spotlight at times is all. What I see when the S hits the fan is the best in people, and that's what I saw when we started doing what we did. After we found that strain on the healthcare system start to alleviate there in the summer, you kind of. The hospitals sort of were, things were getting better for a bit there, and it was less of a need. We hooked up with a foundation out of Rumson Horizons, New Jersey, and I got introduced to Lori, who runs that foundation, and was like, hey, if I needed 8 family addresses a week, would you be able to? And I wanted to feed them, a couple pizzas, some salad, and some wings. Would you be able to kind of provide them? And she's like, hey, we've got 300 or so Monmouth County families who need support. So yeah, I've got 60 critical needs families. I can give you 60 if you wanted them, And so what we started doing next is people were just reaching out. They wanted to support. They wanted to get involved. They wanted to contribute money. I was like, hey, I don't want your money, dude. I've got the cheese. I've got the oven. I've got the contacts in the pizza business, and I've got my time. But people were just so sort of wanting to be connected to something that they felt like was, organic and doing actual good. And so, we started, we'd go to Restaurant Depot, pick up some salad mix, containers, dressings. We'd buy wings from my man, Eddie, who's our managing partner now at the restaurant. And we would coordinate these deliveries. And what we would do is we would kind of put a note out on social media and ask folks to raise their hand, say, hey, we need 8 hope dealers, delivery drivers, between 12 and 5 p.m. on Saturday for 8 deliveries. And folks would just kind of sign up, and then we'd just go ahead and we'd make a big whiteboard. We'd hang it in my garage, and we'd line them all up, and one at a time, a half hour apart. We'd set up the deliveries. And just for instance, Corey would come pick up the 12:30, and Paul, you'd be returning back with the hot bags, the pizza bags from the 12, and you guys would pass in my driveway like, oh, you're doing okay. Yeah, it was just, gosh, I'll tell you, it was probably just one of the most awe-inspiring times of my life, where we just kind of, so many people were just so dying to do and be part of something that was good. And again, I think we were just there, right? We happened to be there. We happened to be kind of willing to kind of do something, and sort of a bunch of really good people came together to do some really good. And I think, what happened in about August was we found that life was turning back on, right? And people were kind of a little bit starting to kind of get back into some norms, as well as we were. Sports were opening back up, and so it wasn't over, but things certainly changed. I said, hey, this is something we really that we really felt like we did some good with. So me, Kenny, Big Kenny, and Ronnie, I was like, hey, if we just go buy a restaurant, we can do Slices of Hope whenever we want. Matter of fact, we can call it Slices of Hope, and we can make as part of our mission not only to run a successful and a profitable business, because you got to kind of do that first. Is as part of that mission, one of our primary purposes would be to kind of deliver hope to folks who need it. And so that's kind of what we do. Matter of fact, I was up there tonight because we had our bi-weekly delivery to the Catholic Charities in Tinton Falls, and we'll send 3 or 4 or 5 meals or so depending on their need every other week over to Catholic Charities, and we have a couple other outlets who we work with on a weekly basis, where we know that the food that we're making is going to people who absolutely need it, and so that's kind of where we're at. We're in the process of sort of rebranding our restaurant that we purchased back in November, formally over to Slices of Hope.
That's awesome. You know what? I got to say, Corey used the word restored before, and in listening to the story, in hearing you talk about seeing the best of people, unfortunately, society sometimes can trend the negative. They focus on the worst of people and the worst of times. Unfortunately, the cocktail of the pandemic and politics, brought out some of the worst of people this summer and beyond. But there was plenty going on that was good. Unfortunately, the headlines don't always lead with that. They lead with things that are going to sell subscriptions and stuff. But you've truly proven that anything is possible with some hope, with some faith. And I'm not going to use the word restored. I'm going to use the word refreshed. You've refreshed my my hope and my faith, and I'm so thankful to know you and to hear your story. And Corey, we talk a lot about what's the title going to be, and I think I have the title. I think it's very simple. I think it's a winner. We'll have to talk about it when we go into post production with Dan and see if he agrees. We can get a hat trick there. But before I kick it back to you, I just want to thank our guest, for being so open and for demonstrating that anything is possible. And we appreciate you, and we're in your corner, and know that we're proud of you.
One day at a time. Anything is possible. Appreciate that, Paul.
Yeah. It's, Daniel, this has really, truly been incredible to, you talk about help comes in a variety of ways. To be able to have a partner like Paul and have a platform that we can share this story. And you're so humble about it. That's another thing I love about you. Like, you're just so humble about it. But, we talk about, you're not an educator, but what do we learn? In order for change to happen, you have to do things differently, right? That's the essence. I mean, it's Captain Obvious, right? That's the essence of change. And the reason that people don't change is because it's easier to stick with what you're doing than to have to put in the hard work around change. And nothing harder than going through recovery of a disease that is so powerful, like addiction, but not just going through recovery, and you continue, right? You're actively in recovery, until the day, God takes you. But then turning it into and manifesting it into hope, the hope. That's why I put the hope dealers up on the screen for those that are viewing and those that are listening. We popped it up there. What a great line. And I voxed Paul today. This is going to blow your mind, Dano. I voxed Paul today, and I said, and I'm going to put it out there right now, that if I could find the time and you're comfortable, I want to write the movie script, right? Because I think of the term hope dealers, and this is where I get choked up. If people, everybody said if you could be anything in this world, be kind. That's true. But if we can each give hope, even a slice of hope, and that's literal with your pizza and figurative, because what I said to Paul today in talking about you was that when you stumbled into that meeting, there was like a sliver, like a minute sliver of hope that got you into that meeting to get you sitting in front of us today, where your service to people, like you, yes, you create good food. I know you want to create good food. You want people to come back to the restaurant. You want people to order. But what I found to be so powerful is your mission of your restaurant is hope. And for me, and I know I can speak for Paul and a lot of other people out there, when you have an organization that has a mission and vision that's bigger than just a product you're putting on a plate, that's when I think, the success will come. And bro, I can't tell you how proud I am of you. The person you've become, the father you've become, the husband that you are, the friend that you are to people, and everything that you do. And the reason that today was such a good day, and we're getting ready to release hopefully by Friday, is we have a lot of people that we're in circles with that are struggling right now in a variety of ways. They're struggling professionally. They're struggling professionally and personally. They're dealing with their own demons and trials and tribulations. And this story says, if you just have a little bit of hope, if you just have a slice of hope, anything is possible. And if you can't see it, hopefully someone's in your circle, in your family, that can help you find that and reach out to it and get you that help. So, bro, from the bottom of our heart, thank you so much for being a part of this. Everybody that's viewing, go visit Slices of Hope. If you're listening and you're in New Jersey, I'm talking about the whole state. I'm not talking about just Monmouth County. Hey, even if you're in New York, right? Staten Island is not that far away. Go visit Slices of Hope at Palumbo's Pizza and Restaurant, 24 Ayers Lane, Little Silver, New Jersey. The phone number 732-842-5505. And let's go out there and do our own delivery of hope by supporting Dano and his mission. And hey, even contact him, and you may even be a hope dealer. So, Dano, any final words as we close this out?
No, you know what? I appreciate the kind words, Corey. I really do. And, I think it's not that complicated, right? There's nothing that anyone can accomplish with the help of others, and and just kind of taking it in small increments, one day at a time, one slice at a time is what one of the taglines over there that we use. I think if you're struggling and you feel like you need some help, just talk to somebody. I think it's certainly, my story has been one that has been empowered by folks who have been there to help. And I think just being willing to kind of to actively kind of seek out that help is that first step. And so it's a hard one to take sometimes. So I think part of the reason why I'm always so comfortable sharing my story so sort of loosely is just because we say in our program you may be the only version of recovery someone ever sees. And so it's not always so easy to just kind of reach out and ask for that help. And I think sometimes some folks just need to know that everyday Joe's or Dan's can do it, and so they can do it too. So I appreciate you guys having me. I appreciate what you guys are doing. The whole StatusGROW message is certainly one that resonates super well with me. I think keep up the fine work. I think we need more folks in the world like you guys, kind of just seeking the change. So appreciate you guys.
Hey, thank you. We're we believe that we're hope dealers, and can't thank you enough. And Paul, you want to close us out, pal?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks again, Dan and Corey. Let's make a pact to each other. You invited me to come out once you get settled in, to your new digs. Let's get over to Slices of Hope and enjoy some pizza with Dan. Maybe we have an opportunity where all three of us are there together. That would be a great StatusGROW moment for sure. But we'd like to thank everyone in the audience for listening and watching our StatusGROW episode 5 with our special guest Dan will be airing very soon. And keep your eyes out, your ears peeled for more details about our next episode and our next very special guest.
Hey there, StatusGROW Nation. On behalf of Paul O'Neill and myself, we hope you enjoyed Dano's incredible story of inspiration and hope. We also want you to know that if you or you know someone struggling with addiction and or depression, there is help and there is hope.